For over 80 years, the 12-step recovery model has dominated the institutional landscape of addiction treatment. It offers a structured, universally recognizable path to sobriety, rooted in deep historical traditions. That tradition relies on a specific vocabulary of moral accountability. The codified literature requires participants to identify their defects of character and confess the exact nature of our wrongs to another human being. For individuals entering recovery with standard behavioral addictions, this framework provides necessary structure. But for survivors of complex early childhood abuse, being told to inventory their character defects often triggers severe, debilitating shame spirals. Traditional cognitive interventions frequently fail this population. Demanding a moral inventory from someone whose nervous system is trapped in survival mode ignores the underlying neurobiology of severe trauma. The underlying architecture of the 12 steps is sound, but applying it to survivors of systemic abuse requires a precise neurobiological translation to make the process clinically safe. To translate the steps, we have to look at the environment where the trauma originated. Chaotic, abusive early childhood environments reliably produce what clinicians call a fearful avoidant or disorganized attachment style. This attachment style is born from a specific, impossible paradox. The child's primary caregiver was simultaneously their only source of safety and their primary source of terror. That paradox shatters the internal working model of relationships. It creates a fragmented, push-pull nervous system response, where the individual desperately craves connection, yet instinctively braces for harm whenever someone gets close. This graph illustrates how that paradox manifests clinically. The nervous system rapidly oscillates between chaotic spikes of sympathetic hyperarousal, fight or flight, crashing directly into the flat line of dorsal vagal shutdown, causing emotional numbing and withdrawal. Treating a person caught in this oscillation requires bypassing cognitive moralizing entirely. Standard 12-step logic is inaccessible to a nervous system actively fighting for survival. The Breaking Chains Life Recovery curriculum addresses this physiological lockout by establishing a strict operating principle before any step work begins, the somatic sequence. The sequence is built on a single biological rule: you cannot reason with a dysregulated body. Before analyzing a single character defect, the participant must establish somatic baseline practices. This involves physical contact probes, like feeling the weight of their feet on the floor, and scanning the environment to confirm physical safety in the present moment. This progression illustrates how higher-order cognitive and relational pathways depend on the steps beneath them. These upper circuits only become available for processing once foundational somatic regulation is established. Achieving somatic regulation is the required operating system upgrade. Without it, executing the traditional 12-step software will only crash the system. With a regulated baseline, Step 4 can be safely translated. Traditionally defined as a fearless moral inventory of personal sins, the clinical translation reframes this as system mapping. This split screen shows the difference. On the right is the core mapping table. Instead of listing moral failures, the curriculum uses this structure to track the physiological and historical root causes of destructive behavioral patterns. The process relies on intergenerational family systems theory. It replaces moral blame with genogram mapping to locate the historical origin of the trauma, linking a current pattern, like emotional withdrawal, directly to early exposure to unpredictable parental rage. Acting out is revealed as a historically inherited survival adaptation. Within this framework, behaviors are viewed as systemic loops rather than expressions of an individual's flawed soul. Externalizing the trauma through system mapping strips the internalized monster identity away from the individual. It renders the inventory restorative instead of punitive. Step 5 traditionally requires admitting the exact nature of one's wrongs to another human being, sumptioning as an act of confession. In the trauma-informed framework, the clinical translation of Step 5 is somatic co-regulation. For a disorganized nervous system, total exposure is equated with total danger. Historically, being fully seen in their worst moments resulted in severe punishment or immediate abandonment. This visualization represents the biological mechanism of the safe witness. Voicing the inventory to an unconditional peer and having that truth received without triggering abandonment or disgust forces a nervous system update. Step 5 serves as a direct somatic correction, providing the physical proof that vulnerability is finally survivable. Steps 6 and 7 ask the participant to become entirely ready to have their defects of character removed by a higher power. The clinical translation borrows terminology from internal family systems. These behaviors are not recognized as flaws, they are categorized as tired protectors. Hypervigilance, emotional numbing, and manipulation were once highly successful strategies. In an abusive environment, they were the exact adaptations that kept the child alive. Releasing them requires a principle known as wu-wei, or systemic surrender. It is the deliberate cessation of ego-driven willpower, shifting away from trying to force behavioral change through sheer discipline. The clinical requirement here is to mourn these survival strategies rather than fight them. Acknowledging their past utility allows the nervous system to finally stand down. Readiness to change occurs through a physiological release, signaling that the environment is finally safe enough to drop the armor. The clinical endpoint of this integrated curriculum is a state called earned security. This occurs when a chaotic, fearful, avoidant attachment style is successfully rewired into a stable, secure baseline. The journey begins with dismantling the internalized monster identity, a label created by early punitive caregiving and frequently exacerbated by traditional moralistic recovery language. Synthesizing polyvagal theory with the 12 steps neutralizes that toxic identity. It replaces the isolation of the traumatized child with continuous, safe mirroring from a regulated community. This state of human continuity means past survival adaptations are not erased. Instead, they are integrated and repurposed into safe, secure relational functioning. The hypervigilance that once scanned for danger becomes profound empathy for others in pain. The highest form of recovery is the complete transformation of a trauma response into a stable foundation for human connection. Maintaining this new baseline requires continuous practice. Recovery operates as ongoing nervous system hygiene, not a one-time cure. Step 10, promptly admitting wrongs as they occur, functions clinically as a routine rupture and repair mechanism. A healthy relational system isn't one that avoids ruptures entirely. It is a system where ruptures are expected, managed, and no longer treated as catastrophic relationship-ending events. Peer-led recovery is vastly more effective when it upgrades its operating system to reflect modern trauma science, matching the lived experience of its participants with accurate biological frameworks. Breaking intergenerational chains requires building a nervous system capable of giving and receiving unconditional presence.